Tight ends ball out on National Tight End Day. Coincidence? I think not. We react to the best, worst, and most surprising fantasy performances of Week 8 on today's episode of Locked On Fantasy Football.
You are Locked On Fantasy, your daily NFL fantasy podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome into the Locked On Fantasy Football Podcast. Thank you for making us your first listen every day. We're here every day, Monday through Friday, helping you win your fantasy football leagues. I'm one of your co-hosts, Michelle Magdziuk, and when I'm not doing this, I'm a researcher and fantasy analyst with NFL Network.
And I'm your other co-host, Vinnie Iyer. When I'm not doing this, I'm writing about NFL fantasy and betting for sportingnews.com. Please like, subscribe to this podcast on YouTube. And if you're doing the audio version, get it wherever you get your podcasts.
Today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. All right, we are going to go through the best performances of the week, the worst performances of the week, and the most surprising performances of the week from some players that you might be able to find on waivers or that have been disappointing. And we'll just let you know if we think it's going to continue or if it was just a one-time big week thing that you don't have to worry about picking up or playing in the future. So let's start with the best performances. We got to start with the tight ends. I mean, it's National Tight End Day yesterday on Sunday, and the tight ends came out balling. Cade Otton, huge game. Kyle Pitts, 2 touchdowns. Trey McBride, Travis Kelce, George Kittle, Tucker Kraft, all huge games. Mark Andrews, Sam LaPorta, David Njoku, and Dalton Kincaid all score a touchdown. We had a little bet going, Dalton Kincaid versus David Njoku. They ended up having very similar production, but David Njoku did just outscore him slightly. But out of this group of guys I just mentioned, every guy that had great games, what performance got you most excited for the rest of the season?
Yeah, I'm really encouraged with Cade Otton because he had come off a 100-yard game, and he gets 81 yards in this game, 2 scores. He's everything we thought that could happen here, right? We like that. When we know that the wide receivers are down, where would Baker Mayfield throw to next? What happened was a wide receiver by committee with the other guys. They had Jalen McMillan, they had a little bit of Trey Palmer, they had a little bit of Sterling Shepard. They were really just spreading the ball around, and there was nobody there standing out. So Otton kind of was the go-to guy. And then, as we suspected, they tried to get the backs involved. It didn't work out too much because they got behind pretty early to the Falcons that had to pass for much of the second half. But that worked in Otton's favor because, again, he was the primary target for Baker Mayfield. And this goes back again. We talked about it, and this is why I liked this potential here for Otton. Liam Cohen and this offense with Baker Mayfield, they had to rely a lot on Tyler Higbee when they were with the Rams just a couple years ago because a very similar situation erupted with the injuries to wide receivers and some issues there with Cooper Kupp. So the precedent was there in this offense that they would go there, work in the middle of the field to make up for not having Evans on the outside. And also, what you also lose in Evans is a guy that can go up and get the ball with his body in the red zone. So they needed somebody to do that. Otton is up for that as well. So he's kind of a mashup of what Evans and Godwin gave Baker Mayfield, and that's why I think he's going to still be targeted quite a bit.
Yeah, Cade Otton, as long as Mike Evans is gone, is going to be a great play. Does get a tough matchup against the Chiefs next week, but with the volume he's getting, he's a solid play. Now, the guy out of this group, out of the tight ends that got me most excited for the rest of the season has to be Travis Kelce for me. 12 targets, 10 receptions, 90 receiving yards, and scored his first touchdown of the season. But since Rice went down, 3 out of the last 4 games, he has 9 targets, 10 targets, 12 targets. He is now back to being the focal point of this offense, and they already passed their bye, so you don't have to worry about that with Travis Kelce. They get the Buccaneers next week. Let's go. And then they just have a lot of easy games on their schedule where Kelce's going to have great matchups. Buccaneers, Panthers, Raiders. They get the Bills, which should be a high scoring game where Mahomes actually has to throw. I think Kelce is going to end up being a league winner the rest of the season.
Yeah, in this position, I mean, it didn't look all that promising, but Mark Andrews has come back. Sam LaPorta has come back. Kelce is looking like Kelce. George Kittle has been picking up where he left off last season. Help as well changes at wide receiver there in San Francisco. But it's a very fruitful position. Now it actually might get difficult in some weeks. Say you're carrying a Kelce or Kittle and you have Otton, you might have to make some decisions at tight end. What I would say is if you got two good tight ends and you're questioning your flex every week, just put one of the guys in the flex. It's okay. You can score good points with the tight end if the matchup is right. If you've got two of them, go after that. I mean, just don't be shy about getting a second tight end that's really good. So people drop David Njoku and you have him, try to get him in your lineup because these guys are all producing like number one receivers at times because they have to. There's a lot of questions. And another guy that's going to be big going forward probably is Evan Ingram because, again, he scored as well. But you also have major injuries that are happening with the Jaguars wide receivers. So take advantage of that, Kelce. I mean, when you have Rashee Rice down, you have concerns about Juju Smith-Schuster. All of a sudden, what happens? They're going to throw to the tight end quite a bit. And DeAndre Hopkins, don't worry about him changing things too much. Xavier Worthy is going to get his in a different style of pass catching, right? He's more of the field stretcher. So Travis Kelce should continue to dominate this way. And you're right. Not only does the matchups open up there for Kelce, but really opens up for Mahomes too. I know we're down on him, but if I was looking for a stack, I would try to get for the rest of the season. I would look at Mahomes and Kelce because I think they're really going to get warmed up. As Michelle said, they'll get some teams that can score on them, which is going to prompt them to pass more. So I do like Kelce and Mahomes going forward to really rev it up and get to their playoff form, so to speak, down the stretch as they look for an undefeated season.
Yeah, I only like Kelce, so don't go. I'm not looking for the Mahomes.
Well, someone has to throw him the ball. Like
he'll get his one touchdown. That's what Mahomes will throw. But I do want to move on to the quarterbacks.
Yeah.
We got to get past the tight ends here. Jalen Hurts, if you drafted him, you were nervous to start the year, right? Before their week 5 bye, before the Eagles week 5 bye, Hurts was averaging just 16.9 points per game. After the week 5 bye, averaging 27 fantasy points per game. He puts up 4 touchdowns against the Bengals yesterday, 3 rushing, 1 passing. He gets the Jaguars next week. Like Jalen Hurts, next upcoming schedule: Jaguars, Cowboys, Commanders, Rams, Ravens. All should be high scoring games. All teams that you can put up points against. I love this for Jalen Hurts. And if you have him in fantasy, you have to be thrilled.
Yeah, and the thing that happened after the bye is they also got A.J. Brown and Devonta Smith back healthy together. If those guys are on the field and you have Saquon Barkley, it's really hard to stop Jalen Hurts because he can throw the ball downfield to these guys. He's not worried about feeding the middle of the field with no Dallas Goedert, so he's focused in on Brown and Smith to make the big plays. He's really got a nice deep ball connection going with Smith. We thought Brown was always the big playmaker, but Smith is hitting those home runs as well. And he doesn't mind stealing touchdowns from Saquon Barkley. Sorry. It always seems to be this way, right? Saquon blows up. Then the next game, he can't get in the end zone. Then he was going to score 2 touchdowns. And then it's a Jalen Hurts game. So I don't know. Jalen Hurts is kind of selfish, man. Like, give Saquon one of those rushing TDs. But if you have Jalen Hurts and you love them just relentlessly pushing him at the goal line, you don't want him to get hurt. But you know that play is going to work all the time. And if they get to the goal line, they're going to do that. So unfortunately for Saquon, if you had him, you're going to have to get 7, 8-yard touchdowns, maybe a 35-yard touchdown. That's kind of the way to get Saquon into the end zone. So Hurts can't just bowl over someone and get in.
3 running backs that all scored touchdowns this week. James Cook gets into the end zone twice, running back 1 on the week. Josh Jacobs gets into the end zone twice. Really broke out once Jordan Love got injured. They were just running down their throats. 127 rushing yards for Josh Jacobs. And then Devin Achane comes back to life with Tua under center. 147 scrimmage yards. He gets a receiving touchdown. Mostert did steal both of his rushing touchdowns, but only had 19 rushing yards on the week. So I still think this is Achane's backfield. But out of these 3 performances, I mean, I guess you're starting all 3 each week, but who got you most excited for the rest of the season?
Yeah, this is a good question. I think James Cook is always going to come through in matchups like that. So that's the way it is. If it's a tougher matchup, he's necessarily not going to do it. Devin Achane, I think, was the guy who excited me most because Josh Jacobs doesn't excite me. He's methodically going to do what he does, and we'll see how this injury to Jordan Love affects this offense overall and the opportunities. But you look at Devin Achane, I think we were so focused on get Tyreek Hill and Joe Waddle going, but we also forgot when you have that threat of Hill and Waddle and people respect the deep arm of Tua is going to help the running game quite a bit. This offensive line is still playing pretty well, even though they've lost some pieces there. They are still run blocking well in the system. And this is what we saw old school. Now, they lost the game, which is also bizarre. When you're running this well, you usually win games like that. But Achane looked good. He looked more explosive. The blocking was there. And again, it all comes from having the running lane. So I'm excited because he was the guy that needed to get going. We've seen it from Jacobs and Cook. Achane had not been anything close to what we expected, and we finally got that this week. So I'm looking forward to see what big things are in store for him in the second half of the season.
Yeah, in the 3 games that Achane played this year with Tua as a starter, averaged 23.1 fantasy points per game in half PPR. He's getting a ton of targets from Tua as well, so that's great. Now, one wide receiver I wanted to bring up for a great performance, just because he hasn't been doing anything. I reverse jinxed him, right? I finally said I got to move down Marvin Harrison Jr., and he finally does something. 6 receptions, 111 yards, a touchdown versus the Dolphins, who have been allowing like nothing to wide receivers. Now he gets the Bears next week. It was a brutal stretch of about a month of him doing absolutely nothing. Can you now trust Marvin Harrison back in your league or back in your starting lineup every week?
Yeah, I think you just have to keep him there on that wide receiver 2-3 line, right? Don't expect him to be a top 12 receiver yet. Let him string some games like this together. The Bears, what's actually promising here is that Terry McLaurin had a big game, even though the Bears have a good secondary. They had a couple meltdowns there because Kyler Gordon didn't play and Tyreek Stevenson was caught looking somewhere in the audience when you had the
Noah Brown.
touchdown. So I'm not buying this Bears secondary. I know they have Jalen Johnson, but it really helps that you have Trey McBride and Michael Wilson playing well because it takes a little pressure off. You have to account for McBride wherever it is on the field, and that opens things up for Harrison. McBride had that big game because, again, I think they finally figured out how to use those two guys together and then bring in Wilson into the mix to help. So the Cardinals' offense in general is looking better with Kyler Murray executing and running. So Kyler Murray in the front end is playing better. That's going to help Harrison as well.
We need Harrison to be better,
Yeah.
right? Like we
He will be.
wanted this to start the season. I'm happy that he had a big game in a harder matchup. And Trey McBride also amazing game, 124 yards. So let's keep doing this for Kyler Murray and that offense. That'll be great. We're going to now get into the most disappointing performances of the week. We brought up that Jaden Daniels last second touchdown with Tyreek Stevenson not looking well. Caleb Williams on the other side, not so well after a huge game before his break. So we're going to get into all of those terrible performances right after a quick break.
This episode of Locked On Fantasy Football is brought to you by LinkedIn Jobs. When you're hiring for a small business, you want to find quality professionals and qualified professionals who are right for the role. That's why you have to check out LinkedIn Jobs. LinkedIn Jobs has the tools to help find the right professionals for your team faster and free. These teams in the NFL are trying to do the same thing. It's a trade deadline. They're looking for the guys that they want to hire and bring into their organization that are going to help them become a better winning team. And you can do that as well. And you just have to go to LinkedIn Jobs because LinkedIn isn't just a job board. LinkedIn helps you hire professionals you can't find anywhere else, even those who aren't actively searching for a new job but might be open to the perfect role in a new organization. In a given month, more than 70% of LinkedIn users don't visit other leading job sites. So if you're not looking on LinkedIn, you'd be looking in the wrong place. On LinkedIn, 86% of small businesses get a qualified candidate within 24 hours. Hire professionals like a professional only on LinkedIn. LinkedIn knows that small businesses are wearing so many hats and might not have the time or resources to hire. They've launched a feature that helps you write job descriptions, making the process even easier and quicker for you. 2.5 million small businesses use LinkedIn for hiring. You should be one of them. Post your job for free. LinkedIn.com/LockedOnNFL. That's LinkedIn.com/LockedOnNFL to post your job for free. Terms and conditions do apply.
This episode is also brought to you by Prize Picks. Prize Picks is the easiest and most exciting way to play daily fantasy sports. Unlike other apps, on Prize Picks, it's just you against the numbers. All you do is pick more or less on 2 to 6 player stat projections and watch the winnings roll in. You can now win up to 100 times your money on Prize Picks with as little as 4 correct picks. They also have an injury insurance policy, which is huge. So if a player goes out, doesn't play the second half, your picks are still in play. Like if you had Jordan Mason as a pick last night, it would not have hurt your lineup. You still, if you won your other guys, you still won your money. Vinny and I will give you our 6 favorite prize picks of the week on Friday's show, like we always do. But if you want to get started before that, you can sign up on the Prize Picks app today and use code LOCKEDONNFL to get $50 instantly when you play $5. That's code LOCKEDONNFL on Prize Picks to get $50 instantly when you play $5. You don't even have to win. Prize Picks, run your game. Let's talk about Caleb Williams. He was looking better before the Bears week 7 bye. He had 2 good fantasy performances in weeks 5 and 6, a huge game in week 6 against the Jaguars, and then in week 8 completely crashes to the ground. He completes 10 passes, 131 passing yards, has 41 rushing yards on the ground, so at least he got you something there. 0 touchdowns. He gets the Cardinals next week. Can you trust him?
I don't know if you can trust him totally at all because, again, this is a good matchup, but I will say the Commanders' defense has been improving. I think he might have been pressing. Maybe he went in thinking, okay, I'm not going to be playing against Jane Daniels, and I don't know if that changed his mindset a little bit. They also had a lot of rushing success. I think in their heart, that's a type of team they want to be, run pretty well with DeAndre Swift. And I don't know what was going on, but Keenan Allen seemed to get open, but it took Cole Kmet a long time to get going. DJ Moore kind of disappeared. Rome Odunze made a few catches, but I'm just surprised that they had all these good secondary matchups and they didn't really take advantage of them in this game. And part of it is the Commanders front had a pretty good day going after him and putting some pressure. So again, that's going to happen. Rookies on the road can face things like this, especially Dan Quinn defense, very savvy coach who can go after it against rookies. So the Cardinals, again, are getting a little bit better defensively, it seems like, but they still gave up quite a bit to Tua. They didn't give up the 2 touchdowns, but there were just some things there to look at. So, again, I would be wary of starting Caleb Williams. I think I would feel a lot better about him starting at home. And, again, maybe we overrated what he did against the Panthers and Jaguars, which is possible. But, again, the numbers said the Commanders were vulnerable, and you just did not have a good game.
Apparently, the Commanders, though, might have a much better defense than anyone will give them credit for. They've allowed 15 or fewer points in 4 of their last 5 games, which is crazy for the Commanders. Now, Joe Burrow, he just can't get it done without T. Higgins, without both T. Higgins and Jamar Chase there. T. Higgins gets an injury pop up on Friday. He misses the game. Hopefully, he's back soon. It seemed like maybe he was questionable to play, but he couldn't go. But Burrow, 1 touchdown, 1 interception, 234 yards, just 12 fantasy points. In the last 2 weeks, he's scored 14.9 and 12.8 fantasy points. A lot of bad weeks this season. He gets the Raiders next week, then the Ravens. So should be 2 good weeks for him. But if he doesn't have T. Higgins back, I don't know if I can rank him as a top 12 guy.
Yeah, it's very strange. I mean, we talked about this earlier when T. Higgins was out. And when I saw the news like that he was trending to not playing, I was like, this is not good. And because what happens is they rely too much on Mike Gesicki as the second target behind Jamar Chase, and that's a big drop-off. That's not the same thing you get. I don't know what's happened with these other receivers that they were high on, right? They're just kind of not been there. I mean, Jermaine Burton made a play early. Then you had Andre Isvas be a factor. Trent Irwin was actually decent last year, but these guys have totally disappeared from being anything worth anything. So what's happening is this got to be frustrating for the Bengals. This is a big game, and Higgins not being able to go with that ailment late had to be a bit frustrating. I think, again, this is all heading toward them drafting maybe a first-round receiver to replace Higgins because, again, I don't see them re-signing a guy that can't be relied upon here. So it started out well for Burrow. It just fell apart quickly, even in the garbage time against the Eagles. So, again, it does concern me. They do get the Raiders this week. They're not a running team, even though you can run on the Raiders. So I think you'll get Joe Burrow rebound this week, regardless of who's in there with him.
Yeah, if T. Higgins is back, like I'm in, especially against the Raiders and the Ravens, like for sure. But it just seems like he really needs T. Higgins out there. Now, moving over to the running back position, there was a lot of disappointing performances. Kenneth Walker, Breece Hall, 2 guys that were being ranked like top 5 this week in many consensus rankings. Walker, 9 carries, 12 yards. He does put up 4 receptions, 33 yards, but still only scores 6.5 fantasy points and half PPR against the Bills. It's really his first bad week of the season. First week under 11 points. Gets the Rams next week and then a bye. And then Breece Hall, he does have 89 total yards, but only 1 reception, 0 touchdowns. So only 9.4 fantasy points for him against Houston next week. Who are you more worried about, Kenneth Walker or Breece Hall moving forward?
I think it's definitely Breece Hall, just because I don't know what's going on with the Jets. I mean, they should have
They're so
smashed.
embarrassing. They're
Yeah,
so embarrassing.
they actually had all these stats go in their favor, but they didn't win the game, which was very strange. So I don't know what's going on. I mean, the Texans, you can put up some numbers that we did see the Colts with Jonathan Taylor get 100 yards rushing on them just now. So there is some opportunity there in the short week on Thursday to get going, but I just don't want to be attached too much to this Jets offense at this point. Where the Seahawks offense, let's hope DK Metcalf can come back, because not him being out there and being able to stretch the field and really give them a threat didn't help in opening up the running game. You could really take them away with the remaining Bills defensive backs, right? So I think that hurt, and maybe just being too dependent on stretching the field and throwing the deep ball, not thrown underneath a little bit in that game. So again, the Seahawks have been weird the last 2 weeks. They played out of their minds to beat the Falcons, and they were just terrible. Didn't even show up against the Bills. So I don't know which team you're going to get in any given week with Seattle. So that's the thing. But Walker, he's got a better history of production this season as a scorer and receiver than Hall has, for sure.
Yeah, Hall is just all over the place, and this is where really how he has been his whole career, right? The high highs, the low lows,
Yeah.
and it doesn't really seem to be changing with Aaron Rodgers. He's not getting nearly as many scoring opportunities as you would like with Aaron Rodgers back there, because the Jets just aren't scoring points still, and only 3 targets, 1 reception. Like that's where Hall gets his fantasy points. So I'm definitely worried about Hall. He'll still have some big games like he always does, but it's going to be a lot of bad games in between too. Another Jets player, Davante Adams. We were like, okay, maybe in the second game, because he got 9 targets in the first game. It was a tough matchup against the Steelers. It didn't, 4 receptions, 54 yards for Adams.
Yeah.
What, are they going to come together? Is Adams washed? What's going on?
Yeah, it seemed like a desperate move when it happened, and now it looks like a useless move if they've lost 2 games with Adams. And I don't know what's going on. Like, Aaron Rodgers just seems disconnected with everybody, really, and just trying to get someone involved. I don't know. Like, it was ugly. Like, they had a couple good red zone chances. I thought for sure, okay, this is an Adams time, but they went to Tyler Conklin. They go to Xavier Gibson. So I don't know what's going on. Like, I don't think Davante Adams expected the Jets to be worse than the Raiders or on the same level as the Raiders when he went on the move here. So I hope he's happy with Aaron Rodgers, because it's going to be ugly. He wasn't totally bad, 4 for 54, but you expect a lot more for him, and then that situation. Now, I think, same way, I think Amari Cooper, like Davante Adams, seem to be acquired to help other people versus just the direct result of that player. And Amari Cooper definitely has opened it up here for Khalil Shakir this week, and Dalton Kincaid, and Keon Coleman. But individually, I think just Amari Cooper's presence is nice, but I don't know if they're going to force him into targets the way that he's been used to with the Browns, right? I think they can spread the ball around a little bit, and if the matchup is not right, like we thought it could be a bit of a struggle against that secondary, they're going to go elsewhere.
It is interesting. He still only played 50% of snaps. Now, the Bills were killing him, so yeah. I'm sure he sat out for most of the fourth quarter. That was a big part of it. But I think better days are ahead for Amari Cooper. Davante Adams, I'm sure once in a while it's fine, the end zone, have a big game. But this Jets offense is a disaster. I don't see it getting fixed anytime soon. And yeah, that's about it for that. When it comes to other players, though, because we had a lot of disappointing players, right? We have to find out, are there other players that we want to play over them, right? We had a lot of surprising performances, a lot of guys that maybe we hoped could be good, but actually were good. So let's discuss those guys and see if we believe in them moving forward, or if we think it was just a one-hit wonder. We'll get into that to close out the show right after a quick break. This episode of Locked On Fantasy Football is brought to you by the Game Time app. Buying tickets to your favorite events shouldn't be stressful. Game Time is a fast and easy way to buy tickets for all the sports, music, comedy, and theater near you. With killer deals on last-minute tickets and their best price guarantee, you can stop stressing over the tickets and start getting hyped for the fun you'll have. It truly is the fastest growing ticketing app in the country for many, many reasons. A, you get a panorama view of your seat before you buy, so you know exactly what to expect when you arrive. You know exactly what you're going to be looking at. You know that nothing's going to be blocking your view of whatever you want to see. You can feel safe buying your tickets. It takes like seconds to buy the tickets. I'm super, super impatient, so this is very important to me, but 2 taps and you're set. And then the tickets are sent right to your email. Super, super easy. And they also have the best ticket coverage in the business in case anything goes wrong. They have event cancellation protection, 24-hour return guarantees, job loss assurance. You get to take the worries and the guessing work out of buying tickets with Game Time. Just download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms to apply. Again, you redeem the code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off. Download Game Time today. What time is it? Game time. We had a lot of injuries this week. Stephon Diggs, for one, knee injury, non-contact. Still waiting to see exactly what that is. Jordan Love, groin injury. I feel like maybe he could have played through it, but Malik Willis was like playing way better than him, and that the Packers offense was moving better without him. Drake May gets a concussion. All the Jaguars wide receivers hurt. Christian Kirk out for the season with a shoulder injury. Brian Thomas Jr. chest injury, did not return. Gabe Davis shoulder did not return. Got to keep a close eye on those Jaguars wide receivers here. But in terms of like guys that you can replace them with, let's start at the quarterback position, especially if you have Jordan Love and you need to find a replacement if he doesn't play. Bo Nix and Jameis Winston both balled out, right? Bo Nix 4 touchdowns against the Saints. He gets the Ravens next week. How you feeling about our rookie Bo Nix?
Yeah, he was our sleeper of the week at quarterback. He worked out beautifully here, as well as Cade Otton. So we're happy about that. I mean, he just looked good. And again, the Panthers are a pretty weak defense, and anyone can light them up at this point. So let's have that prepared for the next guy that we really like on this level. So when you look at Bo Nix, I mean, he's a good runner. He's spreading the ball around well. He's using different weapons, right? It's like every week it's someone else. Devon Bailey was the guy before. Now it's Courtland Sutton, Adam Troutman. So he's really becoming like a veteran in that sense. We're spreading the ball around, being very accurate, getting the ball out quickly. So if there's a decent matchup where he can be protected, he's going to produce. And we definitely saw that against the Saints. So he is definitely dangerous. The Ravens, it should be a high-scoring game. He's going to have high volume. And the weapons are starting to come through a little bit better. I mean, Courtland Sutton, I did play him in a stack. We've mentioned that with my FanDuel lineup, Nix and Sutton. He comes through the 100 yards after putting up a 0 last week. So when you look at that, I mean, this kid can get it done. You just have to execute and get it to the right players. And I think this is good. If you've got some issues, especially some of those Jaguars issues, and as you mentioned, Love being out, you can look here. I think another place you can look at as well is Malik Willis directly there, right? They're playing the Lions this week. He looked pretty good coming in. So these are some options there. You shouldn't be really too bad. I mean, that's one position. If you lose a player like Jordan Love, you can find someone to play and play for a couple weeks.
Yeah, I mean, another guy you might be looking at here is Jameis Winston, who puts up 334 yards, 3 passing touchdowns, doesn't throw an interception. I mean, he did throw one, but it wasn't caught. It was right in Kyle Hamilton's hands to close out that game. Didn't catch it. Winston throws a touchdown immediately after that. It was the Jameis Winston experience there at the end of the game. But, I mean, he all of a sudden made this Browns offense good. Shocker. Right? Cedric Tillman, a guy I really liked coming into this matchup, 7 receptions, 99 yards, 2 receiving touchdowns. He's getting the opportunity. He played on 90% of the snaps. I love him moving forward. Elijah Moore, all of a sudden, can catch a ball. 12 targets, 8 receptions, 85 yards. I mean, 85 yards on 12 targets isn't anything special, but it's good to see him get targeted. David Njoku had a good game at 5 receptions, 61 yards, and a touchdown. The biggest issue with Jameis Winston and any of these playmakers for him, they get the Chargers next week, and then they have a bye. So that's 2 weeks that you don't feel great. Obviously, the bye, you can't play at all. Then the Saints after the bye. Cool. Yay. After that, it's the Steelers, the Broncos, the Steelers, the Chiefs. This might be one of the most brutal schedule for fantasy players moving forward.
Yeah, what I liked about Jameis Winston, he was kind of like Joe Flacco was last year, and really Joe Flacco this year with the Colts. Just facilitating the playmakers, right? This is what Elijah Moore was picked up for. This is what Jerry Jeudy was picked up for. This Njoku being in the situation. Cedric Tillman playing the Amari Cooper role. He was just executing the offense, and this tells you that a lot of their offensive woes were probably just basically tied to Deshaun Watson's play. I mean, when you play decently against a good team and a weak pass defense, and these are the numbers that you should put up, right? If you look at the way that teams have been lighting up the Ravens, I mean, you got to hand it to Jameis Winston. He came out there, fired as a leader. He took full advantage of the opportunity. The game script also played in his favor where he was back and forth with Lamar Jackson. Yeah, it is hard to go forward, but the good news is even if you're not playing Winston, you can feel better about playing these receivers. Now, I wouldn't go crazy and pick up Jerry Jeudy and Elijah Moore, but I think one of them is going to have some value in particular matchups because of Winston throwing so well. But Njoku and Tillman are the staples here. Other things are going to happen. This in turn is going to help the running game at once. So I do like Winston again. Taking over, he's very proud to take over. I think this is an overdue move for the Browns. They should have done it even before Watson was hurt. So I think Browns, again, are not going to be that rollover offense anymore because of just having a competent quarterback.
I know, it's so funny to see how immediately that they can move the ball without Watson. And you saw it as soon as Watson went down the last game. Winston comes in for one drive and scores a touchdown. But clearly this offense can move as long as Watson's not back there. Now, two other wide receivers, Lad McConkey. He has his first, honestly, good game of his NFL career. 111 yards, 2 touchdowns, comes out of nowhere against the Saints. Gets the Browns next week. Was this just a great matchup for him, or do you think this is he's a rookie? Did he break out and this is going to be the way he's used? It was only 6 targets, but he caught all 6 balls for 111 yards.
Yeah, it's very slow play with this Chargers offense for sure. They were trying to get Jalen Reagor involved early. They didn't have Quentin Johnson again. So I think it's going to be by committee playing the best matchups week to week. And then last week, it was a lot of the tight ends where Will Dissly kind of disappeared this week, I should say. So it's just hard to know where the Chargers are going to go. But McConkey, they drafted for a reason, right? They thought he could replace Keenan Allen in that kind of go-to role all over the field. And that's what you're seeing a little bit more. And he's the healthiest of their young receivers. So it was going to happen eventually. The Saints maybe not seeing the ideal spot to have that happen, but Saints were banged up at corner, right? They didn't have Alontae Taylor. They were struggling in the middle. So you can't exploit the Saints a lot more now with your wide receivers. So I do like this going forward. The Chargers, again, play the Browns. It's hard to know what you're going to get from McConkey consistently now, but at least he's in the throes of the offense. So I do think he does have more value as a wide receiver 3 going forward. He's actually managed in a lot of leagues, so you can't get him really easily because everyone is so hyped about it. Maybe he'll finally live up to that hype.
Yeah, if you're able to trade him, I would for anything because I'm not going to want to trust him moving forward. Josh Downs, 109 yards and a touchdown, his first good game with Anthony Richardson this season. He's had some good games with Joe Flacco. Most of the points came from one huge play, right? The 69-yard touchdown, but he did lead the team with 9 targets. I do think Josh Downs is a fine flex play moving forward. He's going to have some bad games with Anthony Richardson, but he has that big play ability. He is the lead target in this offense. I think Josh Downs is a fine fantasy asset moving forward.
Yeah, I mean, Anthony Richardson was terrible, and he still managed to get Josh Downs the ball a few times to make big plays and give us a good fantasy day. So I didn't see it necessarily coming. I mean, you take away that one play, and it was not a very good day beyond that because it was a 69-yard touchdown. Otherwise, it's 3 for 40, and then we're not talking about this too much. But again, I'm just mad at the Colts in general. Like, figure it out a little bit more. You have Michael Pittman, you have Downs, you got Mitchell, you got Pierce. You've got some weapons here. Just figure it out. I feel like from week to week, they just don't know what they're doing. And this is surprising because they have Shane Steichen there. So I don't know what you're going to get from Downs. But at this point, if Flacco's in there, he's almost a must start as wide receiver 3. And I think you look with Richardson in there, I mean, he's just the guy that is making the most plays. So you put him in there, hope for the best as a wide receiver 3, no matter what matchup you have. You do get the Vikings this week. They gave up a lot of points to wide receivers, as we saw with Puka Nacua and Cooper Kupp. So it's a really good spot to keep playing Downs, no matter who's the QB on the short week.
Yep. He's going to be a really great high ceiling play this week against the Vikings. Now, Calvin Ridley gets his first game without DeAndre Hopkins. It's not like DeAndre Hopkins was doing anything anyways, but first game without him, and he gets 15 targets, 10 receptions, 143 yards against the Lions. You really like Calvin Ridley this week. You called this one. Will he continue to see, obviously not 15 targets, but this 10 plus targets with Hopkins not there if Mason Rudolph stays a quarterback? Because if it's not Mason Rudolph and they go back to Will Levis, then I don't really care about Calvin Ridley.
Yeah, they get the Patriots this week. We'll see if the Patriots move a defensive back or 2 at the trade deadline. But And the Patriots are decent, right? They can scheme it up a little bit. The Titans could have some pressure on the quarterback, whether it's Rudolph or Levis in there. So I do feel better with Rudolph because he kind of was just a gamer. He came in there, like had that one juke on the touchdown. He was just doing his best. It wasn't pretty, but he did facilitate Ridley quite a bit. Didn't have to force feed another veteran, DeAndre Hopkins. So that probably helped. And didn't have Tyjae Spears as well. So that takes away another weapon that they have. So a lot of it just went through Tony Pollard and Calvin Ridley in this game. So I think that's what the Titans are going to have to do going forward. They're a terrible team. Now, the Patriots give them a chance. Again, they have enough defensive holes where you think Ridley could have another good game if he gets the targets and that. So, again, I think just seemed like the Titans, before the game got out of hand and they just were like stunned, they were actually moving the ball pretty well. And Ridley was making plays. He had 115 of those yards in the first quarter. So he was rolling. They'd made an adjustment, then everything got out of hand here. So, again, just stay in the game, Titans. Stay in a few more games, and Calvin Ridley can be a lot more effective.
Yeah, maybe the craziest stat line of the day was Jared Goff's 85 passing yards, but 3 passing touchdowns. So it stunk for like Amon-Ra St. Brown, who only had 7 receiving yards. Thank goodness he came down with the touchdown. But that was a really interesting game overall, the Titans versus the Lions. Calvin Ridley should get the targets, but it's not going to be pretty. I'm not really all in on Calvin Ridley just after that one performance. Honestly, Josh Downs and Cedric Tillman got me excited this week for the rest of the season. McConkey and Ridley, I'm kind of selling on moving forward. That is it for today's episode. Thank you to you all for making Locked On Fantasy Football your first listen every day. Remember to hit that subscribe button on YouTube. Give us a review on wherever you're listening to podcasts. That will help us grow tremendously so that we could be here every single day to help you win your fantasy leagues. Enjoy Monday Night Football. We'll talk to you tomorrow. Bye, y'all.